Well, hello everybody. It's a dark elf lady, who's going to be nice to you and wave to you. And look, she has a scary tattoo on her forehead, but it's not actually that scary because even though she's a disciple of Cain, she's going to use her magic for good. Her magic is for healing and for putting curses on bad people. And only bad people. You know, you're going to see a chaos person, you're just be like, and then, they're going to fall over. But it's kind of actually weird. I mostly have that attitude towards chaos in fantasy. I don't really have that attitude towards chaos in Warhammer 40k. In Warhammer 40k, I think chaos is actually way more interesting. But in fantasy, it just kind of seems like it's just like a generic villain. It feels like in 40k they do much more interesting things with the ideas of chaos, and they like make it so that there's much more reason to actually go for chaos. Whereas in fantasy and Age of Sigmar, it's like, why did you go for chaos? Oh, we went for chaos because we were dickheads and we wanted to be evil. And it's like, oh, okay. And it's like, why? I guess in Age of Sigmar it can also be because they beat up a lot of people. So it's like, oh well, if they're gonna beat you up, I guess you gotta not be beat up sometimes. Um, but this is a Maiar. She is a disciple of Cain. I enjoyed making her. I thought she was neat, but I haven't actually played her yet. And originally I was going to do a video and I was going to play as the Bright Wizard. I have to say, after playing some more of the Bright Wizard, I really don't enjoy the Bright Wizard class in this game. I really, really enjoy just being a cool lady, elf lady. And I think the tattoo on her forehead looks pretty cool. And like she has pretty eyes. So, that's nice. I mean, the Bright Wizard lady is also pretty, and me, I love being pretty, but still. Um, I think it's also kind of interesting because I feel like dark elves are kind of an interesting. So something I like about Warhammer is that like every species kind of feels alien to one another. Like they actually feel like they're like they think differently. Like in a lot of fantasy stuff, you get this thing where, like, for instance, dwarves are just like short people who maybe have certain cultural hangups, or elves are just like pointy-eared people. But in something like Warhammer, elves and dwarves are distinctly different from humans. They think about things in a profoundly uh, different way, and I just personally find that much more interesting than like when they're basically just like the exact same as uh your like human counterparts. It's like, no, let's make them different, let's make them weird and interesting, and like, look at her spooky blood magic, that's kind of neat. And I mean, I think that that's a very interesting way to approach it. And I was kind of looking at Dark Elves, because Dark Elves at one point were actually one of my favorite um races in all of Warhammer Fantasy. I read the book Malakath, and the one where he where it kind of goes over his downfall and how he became a bad boy, a boy of bad, if you will, and how he was like, "Oh, you want me to not be the next Phoenix King? Well, here, let me just fall into this fire and become the next Phoenix King." How did that get? That was a twofer. I don't know how I did a twofer there. And it's just like it's funny to watch him fall in and just be like, oh no, Daddy is a Syrian. Stop burning me. And then, but then, like, when did you know about like Age of Sigmar? It turns out that he was actually meant to be the Phoenix King. Excuse me, I had a little yawn there. But like he's actually meant to be the Phoenix King, and then that like begs like a whole lot of questions, and it's kind of weird the way that all ends up playing out. But I like the idea of dark elves as this like, this big spooky society. Wait, that was a healing thing. That's just for healing me, isn't it? Yep. Yep, that is. Okay. I healed myself from 0 damage. But yeah, I do find it very interesting. Like dark elves in particular were kind of interesting to me because the more I read about Malakath, the more I was kind of like actually on his side, even though he also seems like he's a tremendous douchebag. It's like you're reading and you're like, oh man, this guy is just like such a douchebag. But at the same time, he has a point. And, but then it's like it gets weird with his mom, like when he comes back from going on his weird tour to the Chaos Waste, because I don't know, I guess when you're bored and they're not allowed to be the Phoenix King, this is what you do. I guess you just go to the Chaos Waste and you're like, oh, I'm gonna look for artifacts and things and be a beautiful boy. But he goes up there, interacts with Spooky Crown. Spooky Crown makes him go as it would, and then he comes back and he like encounters these weird pleasure cultists and he's like, kind of cleaning them up and stuff like that in Nagaroth. Or wait, is it? I want to say Nagaroth is the name of the place. I'm trying to remember if Nagaroth is the name of the original part of Ulthuan, or if it's the name of the place they end up going, or the weird arc things they end up building. Whatever, doesn't really matter. Anyway, but like he comes back, there's pleasure cultists and they're all like, pleasure cult, and then they thrust their hips at him, and he's like, no. And he ends up finding out that his mom's behind like the pleasure cults. And I don't know. He to me, Malakath was a very interesting character, and I personally found him at least somewhat like more like I always kind of got the impression that it seemed like he was kind of more rightfully supposed to take the throne, but at the same time it was a good thing that he ended up not doing it, because then everything that ends up happening happens, and that was kind of bad for all of elfdom. And then he actually ends up being the one to start the War of the Beard. If you read Honor Keeper, or well, no, I don't know if he starts the War of the Beard, but he does start the war in Honor Keeper, and I think that's related. It's very interesting to me. Anyway, like there are these kind of like mostly irredeemable sacks of poo. But I also like the idea. See, I always like the idea of like villains turning around and becoming like good guys in the end. And I kind of like the idea of like in Age of Sigmar, you can kind of get the Dark Elves just kind of be like a part of like the Cities of Sigmar stuff. And I like the idea that they're like, gonna help, and yeah, like they are pirates and they're not necessarily good guys or anything like that. But at the same time, you can kind of view them in this interesting light where like, maybe you can have them just be scary, but just be kind of like scary on the surface, and maybe have some scary cultural remnants, but at the same time, they're still like somewhat redeemable. I think is kind of an interesting way to go about it. I mean, in this they're not really super redeemable. I mean, look at this lady. Look at this lady. Look at the scary staff she has and the spiky hem. That's like the biggest thing I don't like about Dark Elf design is like they just go a little too heavy on the spikes, man. Also, a lot of the ladies wear really skimpy outfits, which, I mean, hey, if you're into that and you want to see boobies and butts and thighs and things like that, it's like, I understand that. That is a thing that a lot of people like to see. It's understandable, but when I'm playing a Dark Elf, I don't want that to be my thing. I want to be, like, wearing something more like this. I want to have, like, more, like, armor. or like practical clothing. I think practical clothing is like a is like really that really helps me get into things. Like for instance, I like Infinity. This is just kind of unrelated, but sort of related. But like I like Infinity, for instance, and one of the problems I have with certain armies in Infinity is that everybody has like tactical rocks, and it just starts, or like sometimes some of the characters are just wearing skimpy clothes, or like like I like Dark Elves, but like Witch Elves I think just look kind of silly. Like I think this gladiator outfit just looks kind of silly. I mean, hey, if you're really into that, that's cool. I understand. Not everything has to meet my tastes. La 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 la. Know what I mean, Jimmy Dean? But no, I enjoy certain parts of the Dark Elf aesthetic. I kind of just wish it was maybe toned back a little bit. Like this looks cool to a certain extent. Just tone. Like what is this? Why? What is the purpose of this? This looks so silly. Unless you're like using it for like watermelon slicing. Or that would be good for watermelon slicing. I mean, if you're doing it for the sacrifice, no, you wouldn't do that for the sacrifice because the blood goes in here. So it's it's just like a little bit too much. It's a little bit too much. But yeah, I do. Now, see this? I think this is a really good design. It has like enough of the spiky and the dark elements that I think it looks good overall, but it doesn't go quite super over the top. And I think that's a really good place for them to go. Um, and I do like their spookiness. I also kind of like the idea of the like all these like weird pirate people. I kind of like the idea of like being not mean though. So I always have like a little thing where I like the idea of like a Druki, a dark elf lord or lady figuring out that hey, it's not all it's cracked up to be, and maybe we can have a better life outside of evil not Kamara, outside of the Black Arcs. Because I mean, like look at that. It seems like it would be cool, but doesn't it also seem like it would just get like kind of tiresome for everything to just like look like that? And then it's like, oh yay, there's like pretty trees and towers and things, and you could like, go over here and enjoy yourself in this kind of atmosphere. Or maybe like you get like I like the idea of like a disciple of Cain getting a human slave and then like slowly getting like attached to the human slave because they just talk to them differently, and maybe they're like a little bit more resistant and things like that, and then it's like slowly but surely they kind of like let them go and they're not really a slave anymore, and it's just like the guy or the gal wants to escape and they're like come with me, and then like the dark elf disciple lady is like I can't come with you, I'm stuck with this life, and it's like no you're not, you can come with me and we can go live a better life somewhere else, and then they go back to the empire, and then they have like a little happy life for a little bit. That sounds nice. I like stories like that. I, I do enjoy villains to a certain extent. Like I enjoy Skaven and Dark Elves and things like that. Chaos is one of the factions, at least in fantasy, that I still kind of go eh. I find them much more interesting in 40k, like I said. But like I I think the idea of like exploring what it would be like to live in a society like this, and just kind of like maybe have somebody just kind of say, hey, everyone's just kind of miserable, and then just like kind of break away from that. I just really enjoy that idea. And I also really enjoy the aesthetic of like I like this like white hair and this like skin tone, and like the scary blades. Like the blades look cool. I think the executioner's blades, like that just looks like it would get caught on something. Like that really and truly just looks like the kind of thing that you would just like would tie a gambeson onto a pole and then smack their sword so like it's like stuck in the fabric, and then you just like start kicking them. You know what I mean? Know what I mean, Jimmy Dean? Like you could use your spooky magic to get them. Actually, I just realized I don't know what happens for dark elves. Oh, look at this little spooky thing. And I kind of just like the darker aesthetic of certain things. Like high elves are really nice too, and a lot of their stuff is really pretty. But maybe it's like a little too pretty in certain senses. And I kind of like the like a little bit more darker stuff to it, which is why the like shadow warriors and stuff like that are pretty neat to me. Tokens of war, okay, doesn't it? Yeah, see, and then this guy's gonna have me go like capture someone for amusements purposes. Why would you? That doesn't that just look silly though? Imagine like you're in a fight and he's like, oh, and then you just kick him like, and he like jabs his eyes or his face into the thing. I mean, I guess to a certain extent they're kind of like into that. They're kind of into the pain without love, pain. I can't get enough. You know, stuff like that. And I think that's kind of amusing. Hey, I see you guys are just like over here escaping with prisoners and stuff. That's fine, honestly. I'm not really too into the idea of like trying to kill you or something just for escaping with a prisoner. I think that's I think that's perfectly fine, really. Um, and it's a good thing you're NPCs, so it's like it's not really like it costs you nothing. It's good that they're just gonna respawn. You guys look tired. Wait, can I have to back up to do this first, actually. I'm gonna toast you. Toast! Escape! Dear Lord, look at the elves really like their elongated designs. It's kind of interesting. Like, especially in like the Warhammer universe, they seem to really like kind of being a little bit lanky and things like that. But they also have like a lot of strength and things like that, which is neat. Um, yeah, elvish design in Warhammer Fantasy especially is something I rather enjoy. I bet that's not a gauntlet I can wear. It is not. It's for chosen. Although I have met people who just enjoy like the idea of just being villainous. Like I've met several people who kind of just like they like being a bad guy. And I can kind of relate to that. I used to enjoy just being a bad guy more, but now I am always trying to be a good kitty cat and do like nice things. The thing about that though is that sometimes for playing Warhammer, there are factions I like which are like not really good guys. For playing on the tabletop and stuff like that, it doesn't really super matter. It's not like I'm like sitting around going, "Oh no, I can only play the guys that are good or the guys that are bad or whatever." Um, Certainly I like it if I can kind of justify my troops' actions as something good, but you know, especially the more I've played, the more I've kind of divorced myself from trying to do that sort of thing. And now it's much more like now it's much more sort of I just play what's cool and what's interesting and I stop worrying about it as much. Like I just found like for instance in 40k I enjoy playing Chaos Marines way more than I enjoy playing regular Marines. Regular Marines are fine, but I find that the interesting things you can do with like the Chaos Marks and like all kinds of different little weird demon things is just I personally find more interesting to play. Um and I did enjoy playing Dark Eldar when I did. Although they were kind of weird. I didn't really understand the pain mark thing. Well, I understood it. I was just like, eh. I don't know. There's just something about like the idea of like causing pain or amusement in particular, like especially with the like Dark Elves and Dark Eldar and things like that, that just feels particularly petulant to me. It doesn't even feel like to me personally. There's something about like someone causing, like you know, like they're capturing prisoners here, and it's like, oh, for our amusement, we're going to torture them and do bad things to them, and oh, we like their anguish. It just I don't know. It just kind of feels well. It feels a little pathetic, honestly. I mean, because I've met people you know, in my years of like trying to help people and meeting a lot of weirdos, I've met people who have like confessed to like hurting animals before and like, you know, tried to help them and try to just get them to steer clear of that. And, you know, a lot of people don't do it presently, or at least they say they don't when you talk to them. And then, you know, try to get them into therapy and things like that, but whatever. but there's always something kind of pathetic and just sad about it. It's like, and you know, it can make you angry, but there's part of me that just like sees it as very like seeking security kind of behavior. And I kind of there's something about like the dark elves that although I enjoy them in a lot of ways, there's something about like the I'm going to enjoy hurting you blah, 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 that just feels petulant and childish to me, and just like insecure in like the extreme, you know. Oh, I don't get that one. You have kind of funky hair. Ooh, yeah, right. Taking some Nicane Craggle right there. But and I guess that's sort of where my liking for the dark elves in fantasy kind of dwindles a little bit, because it does feel that way to me. And like revisiting Malekith and the book, revisiting the book, but also just revisiting him as like a character as I have gone older, it just also feels very petulant to me, where a lot of like the bad guys that aren't kind of silly in Warhammer Fantasy often just feel like they have like very bad justification for what they're doing, where a lot of times just like, this is the only way I can do it, and I have to do it, blah, 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 blah. Oh, hello. Hello. Give, give me stuff. I can't pick up their stuff for some reason. But yeah, I mean, like, just like there's a certain appeal to darkness, and there's a certain appeal to villainy and things like that. But like, occasionally you get stuff that just feels like it's trying too hard to be edgy, and that always to me kind of feels like, oh, you care a lot what other people think. Now, for the elves' sake, that doesn't matter as much with the whole you're doing it to like for what other people think type deal. That's not entirely true for the dark elves. But you know, there's a lot of different kind of dark villainous characters where like you cannot help but go like you just kind of feel like you're doing this specifically to try and get excuse me, a rise out of me, or like you're trying to do this to get a rise out of other people's like, we did this bad thing because it makes bad man angry because haha. It just always feels very but I don't know. Those are just some thoughts I had on the Dark Elves. This is less of a specifically lore thing, and me talking about stuff I find kind of interesting or think about with like Warhammer Fantasy and things like that. And hopefully you enjoyed it. I'm kind of enjoying the Dark Disciple, or is this Dark Disciple? What is this? Disciple of Cain. Yeah, I'm kind of enjoying the Disciple of Cain. It's interesting. The more I've played, the more I mean, this isn't that crazy, but like the more I've noticed that certain classes are just much more fun to play. For instance, like the Bright Wizard was just not really appealing to me the more I was playing it. And but I do find, because I'm making a new tank. I'm gonna make another Knight of the Blazing Sun, because I'm gonna level them up a little differently. Because the first time I played through, I was really kind of meandering around and didn't quite know what I was doing as well. And now I have much more of a build, and like I know what I'm doing as a tank in mind now. So I'm gonna play a new one and level them up with RVR, like more focused, because my other character is kind of low for level 40 in terms of their RVR level and stuff like that. So it's going to be something a little bit like that. And yeah, I've been kind of running around trying out all the different classes. And excuse me. Tank and melee DPS are the two I think I've been enjoying the most. I enjoy healers a bit. It depends on the healer, though. So that's been kind of interesting. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening to me babble about dark elves and things like that, and things I like about them and things I don't like about them and all that stuff. I kind of enjoy this more freeform, just babbling about random stuff. I really enjoy just sharing my thoughts because I have a big cat head with many big cat thoughts. Anyway, I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful day, and you all know that the Emperor loves you, and that Sigmar loves you, and that I love you, and that Ma Kali loves you, and that we all love you. Anyway, love ya. Bye bye. Have a great day. Bye bye.